For my Lest We Forget project, I will explain and explore the details of naturalist, essayist, poet, and transcendentalist philosopher Henry David Thoreau's life. The influence of Thoreau's work has rippled through history, inspiring people from Gandhi, JFK, Leo Tolstoy, MLK, Hemingway, and many more. My main source for this project is a 2017 biography entitled Henry David Thoreau, A Life, by William P. and Hazel B. White, Professor of English at the University of Notre Dame, Laura Dasso-Walls, published by the University of Chicago Press. Over the years, Thoreau's philosophical writings have been subject to criticism of hypocrisy, misanthropy, sanctimoniousness, and generally sending a bad message of voluntary inferiority to his fellow man. Do his philosophical points stand today, or have they become outdated with our modern hindsight? I plan to answer that question today in this presentation. Henry David Thoreau was born as David Henry Thoreau after his recently deceased uncle on July 12, 1817, to John Thoreau and Cynthia Dunbar. Henry was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts, after his family moved to Boston, but returned to Concord shortly after in 1826. While the Thoreaus lived in Boston, Henry discovered Walden Pond for the first time at the age of 5, foreshadowing a place that would help concrete his place in history. Henry later attended Concord Academy, where he learned arithmetic, French, and Greek. At age 16, Henry was accepted into Harvard University and entered on September 1st, 1833. Most of Henry's family had not attended college, and Henry's acceptance into Harvard became a major source of pride. During Henry's attendance at Harvard was the discovery of Ralph Waldo Emerson's book, Nature. Emerson's ideas about nature had a significant impact on Henry and would later meet him. After graduating Harvard in 1837, he returned to Concord and became a teacher at the Concord Public School. After only 2 weeks, he left for refusing to instill corporal punishment in his students. He later founded his own school with his brother, John, Concord Academy. Thoreau began meeting with Emerson, along with other transcendentalist thinkers and philosophers around this time. During these meetings, Henry and Emerson became closer and closer friends. Eventually, they grew so close that Emerson allowed Thoreau to stay at his home after Thoreau had to close his school in 1841. In 1842, Thoreau's brother John contracted lockjaw, now commonly referred to as tetanus, after he cut himself shaving. Quote, "It was an insignificant cut, and no one suspected anything wrong, but it was deep enough to let tetanus spores enter John's body. Only decades later would doctors realize that tetanus bacteria can lurk in animal droppings and soils treated with manure, the very setting of John's daily chores. 2 or 3 days later, his finger began to hurt. The following Saturday, he found the skin he'd replaced had been mortified, and alarmed, he walked over to see Dr. Bartlett, who reassured him, dressed the wound, and sent him home. But the neurotoxins released by the incubating bacteria were already at work. Walking home, John felt strange pains throughout his body and barely made it to the door." End quote. Henry was crushed by his brother's death, so much so that he had contracted sympathetic lockjaw, but recovered shortly after. Quote, "Deep in depression, he lapsed into passivity, sitting in the house, able to do nothing. His sisters tried to walk him outside into nature, hoping to revive something of the old Henry, but it didn't help. Friends, Henry had written exactly a year before, quote, are not two united, but rather one divided," end quote. When John died, it seemed half of Henry died with him. Later in the spring of 1845, Thoreau built a cabin in the woods near Walden Pond, and moved that summer on July 4th, 1845, to, quote, live deliberately. Quote, "His original determination to live deliberately and confront only the essential facts of life, voiced so movingly in his earliest days at the pond, show his design to pursue an inward journey, but the accidental circumstances that made that journey possible meant it would be performed on a very public stage. While living deliberately, he authored the book he is most known for, Walden, or Life in the Woods, documenting his account of living at the pond. It was also at Walden that on July 24th, Sam Staples, a tax collector, asked Thoreau to pay 6 years' worth of unpaid poll taxes, but Thoreau refused because of his opposition to slavery and the ongoing Mexican-American War. Because of his continued refusal, Thoreau was thrown in jail and spent the night there. The next day, Thoreau was informed of his freedom because someone had paid his taxes for him. This experience later served as the inspiration for his second major work, the essay Civil Disobedience. Thoreau left his Walden Pond cabin after 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days on September 6th of 1847 and moved back in with Emerson. Thoreau later left the Emerson residence and by 1850 was living in a house near 255 Main Street. In 1857, before the 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry, Thoreau met John Brown and was impressed by his boldness and candor. Quote, "Henry was fascinated by Brown. Thoreau and Brown sat in the parlor talking Kansas. When Emerson dropped by, Thoreau introduced them to each other. Emerson too was interested, enough to invite Brown to spend the night at his home. But at the town meeting, Brown was not peaceful. He said it was better a generation should pass away than a single word of the Bible or the Declaration of Independence be violated. He claimed to abhor violence, but vowed to commit it at God's will." End quote. After Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Thoreau defended him in organized talks, and notably in his speech, A Plea for Captain Brown. Thoreau and other transcendentalists helped give Brown notoriety in a positive and heroic light. In the winter of 1860, Thoreau contracted bronchitis and succumbed to it 2 years later, on May 6, 1862. Emerson read the eulogy at his funeral and was buried in the Dunbar family plot. Thoreau was best known for his transcendentalist ideas of individualism, close relation to nature, and civil disobedience, which launched him into the history books as one of the foremost thinkers and philosophers of not just American history, but of the 19th century. Thoreau spread his ideas in his most notable and famous writings, his essay entitled Civil Disobedience, published in 1849, and his book Walden, published in 1854. Thoreau's work has been cited as the inspiration for Gandhi's civil and nonviolent movement for Indian independence, Martin Luther King's nonviolent approach to the civil rights movement, and many more. Thoreau's character has been attacked during his lifetime and after his death by other authors and people he has met. Even Ralph Waldo Emerson, his best friend and mentor, has been cited as saying, quote, Henry is military. He seems stubborn and implacable, always manly and wise, but rarely sweet. Henry does not feel himself except in opposition. He wants a fallacy to expose, a blunder to pillory. He requires a little sense of victory, a roll of the drums to call his powers into full exercise. End quote. Sections in Thoreau's works have been cited throughout the years as hypocritical, sanctimonious, and misanthropic. Note that responses to these criticisms from other writers and critics cite them as selective to these sections and out of context. There is a reason Thoreau has been launched into the history books as one of America's foremost thinkers. Many people have been inspired by his ideas. His ideas of simple living are especially illuminating in today's dynamic, bustling, fast-paced world today. In addition to that, Thoreau's environmentalist ideas are especially enlightening in today's modern world of prevalent pollution and deforestation. We should remember Thoreau as one of the greatest philosophers in American history and look upon his writings as not just lessons from the past, but also inspiration. These are the sources I used. Thank you for watching and listening to my presentation.